What if the way that we have been taught to manage time is actually keeping us stuck in cycles of burnout and busyness?
Today's guest kicked the hustle and habit, and what she discovered will radically shift how you run your day, your business, and actually your life.
Welcome to the Conquer Club, the podcast for faith driven entrepreneurs who are ready to align their message, master their mindset, and build a business that reflects both calling and cash flow. We're your hosts, Tanya and Kevin Stout, and we are here to help you rise into your next season with clarity, purpose, and a whole lot of God given strategy.
Let's dive into the convo here with Lissa Figgins, an Untimed strategist helping Christian women stop chasing time and start stewarding it like the gift that it is. Lissa, welcome to the Conquer Club podcast.
Hey, thank you. It's so fun to hang out with the two of you. So I really appreciate, your invitation and the time we get to spend together.
Well, Lissa, normally we will say, right here is the confetti. This is where the bells ring. What do you want?
Yes.
What would be your sound that you would want, Lissa?
Right. Just lots of hallelujahs, right? Like, I just feel like, the Lord is always with us. He's the giver of the time and the one that brings the fruit from it. So let's just welcome him in the room and have a great conversation.
Yeah, it's perfect. And we maybe would have a little tick, 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 little sound of the clock going.
With time, there's balloons going all over the place.
There you go.
Well, fantastic. Well, we are grateful to have you here on the Conquer Club podcast. And let's dig in and start with your story. What was the breaking point when you realized your addiction to doing was actually hurting your health? And how did God use the moment to reveal something deeper?
Yeah. Well, doesn't he always do that, right? Where we think we have everything all figured out is exactly where he shows us what we need to see. I've always been the poster child for time management. I've always been a planner, right? Since we had assignment notebooks, like back in the 4th grade, mine was color coded and I had my to-do list, and I was the girl who would write something on her list even after she already did it, just so I could check it off and feel good. I know I'm not alone, right? Yay, Tanya. So I've always been a planner. I've always been a doer. Never not doing something, can't just sit still, always been leading and teaching and, serving and all of that. But the problem was I was never done, right? There was always more to do and I was always busy. And the more I did, the more I felt needed. And the more I felt needed, the more I felt valued. And it was busyness just really became this badge of honor that I didn't know who I was outside of my doing. And so of course I just keep cramming more into the time that I have. Back in the day, my husband would deploy. He was in the military, and so he would be gone for up to a year at a time. I would be at home with 3 kids, running a business, running a ministry, running a household, homeschooling, just taking care of myself, and really it was catching up with me more than I knew, but I was ignoring it. I ignored the butterflies in the stomach and the tightness in the chest and the tension in the shoulders all the time. I ignored the guilt that I should be doing more, which is so crazy when you're already doing a lot that you feel like you're not doing enough, right? Or when I was with my family, I should be working on my business, or working my business, I should be with my family. And I ignored this ball in my throat. And this is really where it comes to that place that you asked about, Kevin. For over a year, I noticed I had this ball in my throat, but who had time to figure it out when you have stuff to do, right? People to see and right, mountains to move. So I ignored it and hoped it would go away, and it didn't. And so after a year, I promised my besties I would go see a specialist because I had had a cancer scare in my throat a couple of years before. And so I started wondering, oh no, is there something that's growing and I need to take care of this? Long story short, after trying lots of different avenues as well as scoping me, he sat me down. He said, Lissa, good news. There's nothing growing in your throat. You have hystericus globus. And he just sat there. You know how a doctor knows, what words mean, and you're just kind of I remember this smirk on his face and this quizzical look in my eye and what is hysterical globus? So he said, globe, like a ball. You have a sensation of a ball in your throat. And he said, hystericus, get this. He starts swirling his finger next to his head like you're crazy. No. And he goes, this is where they got the word hysterectomy from. They thought women were going crazy in, that season of life. He's it's all in your head and I'm happy to prescribe you a pill. And for me, I knew in that moment that a pill was just going to be a Band-Aid for me to keep pushing and doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so I graciously, turned that down, and really just kind of took it to the Lord. It was like, okay, God, what am I not seeing here? Because of course we're blinded to our own stuff, right?
Yes.
And it was after that and kind of through that experience that he showed me through a really significant book. Have you guys read The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by a pastor named John Mark Comer?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, this is like a must read, because he talks about hurry and how it's affecting us and time and all of this. And so it was through that book that I learned that busyness is not a disordered calendar, which is why me having it all color coded and organized wasn't fixing the problem. It's a disordered heart. And for me, as I started digging deeper, what I discovered was I was chasing my not enoughness. My time wasn't enough. My doing wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. It was like the slippery slope, right? And I was just like the people that Jesus described in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 6 that are like running around chasing after all these things they think they need. And he was just like, wait, Matthew 6:33, like, seek me first. I have all you need. In fact, when he taught them just a chapter before to pray the Lord's Prayer, when he says, give us this day our daily bread, it literally means give us today what we need for today. And I believe time is that we're not running around going, where am I getting my bread today? Most of us are saying, how can I not put so much bread in my mouth today? Right.
Yeah.
But time, like, that's that thing that like, I am dependent on him to lay in front of me every day, just like he laid manna in front of the children of Israel, and trust and believe that it's enough or more than enough for what he's called me to. Right. And so it really started shifting my perspective on time. And of course, I looked around and saw there were a lot of other, busy badge wearing women who were also doing this thing. And it was literally in the pew where Ephesians 5:15-16 jumped off the page, and redeem her time was born, because it says, look carefully how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, redeeming the time or making the best use of it, because these are difficult days. Amen to some difficult days, right? And some distractions the enemy wants to throw our way to, get our time going in a different direction.
Yeah. So good. So much information there. So many people can relate. I remember years ago, a family member and I would talk about the badge of honor. This was years ago in the beginning. We would both say, she's the president of the OAA club, and it was Overachievers Anonymous, because we both had so many. Do you remember that, Ked?
Oh,
We
yeah.
both had so many things spinning, but it was. And then when I became free from that, I was like, ew, like the badge of honor that everybody talks about how busy they are and we just can't make it. I'm thinking we are all busy, and our times are equally all important. And it's interesting when you can break free. And again, like even today, Lissa, I was saying, okay, Lord, you have already ordered my steps. I'm getting ahead of you. And I'm thinking, oh gosh. And I have to remind myself, like, you just do what you can do, Tanya. And it is well enough for sure.
Yeah.
So I love that. And then, having the medical thing, a diagnosis that you're like, absolutely not. I know that you knew what the root was.
Right.
And that was, out of the mouth, the heart speaks. And so that's such a great story. So let's talk about women, and you talk about how they're addicted to control. And I want to ask, why do you think that's such a common struggle amongst not just Christian women, just women, period? Because as you mentioned, we juggle a lot of balls, and we do it well. We can open up all the tabs in the brain, but do we do it well? And why do you think it's such a common struggle?
Yeah. Well, I think because we are by nature, God has created us to be nurturers, and givers. And Kevin, I'm sure guys, like experience these types of things to some degree as well, and maybe in a different context. But especially in our roles, we have so many people and things that are needing our time and attention, wanting our time and attention. And so we want to be, I think out of a heart that really truly wants to serve, right? We truly want to. And then we think like multitasking is going to be our superpower, and we're doing all the things all at once, but really it just divides our focus, and when you think about like, Yeah, like, am I really present? Because proximity is not the same thing as presence, right? You can be in the room, but not be in the room. I mean, that's like, I look back at my kids are all now out of the house and, but I look back when they were younger and it was like, I mean, if, we'd be like in their room playing and mom's like, collecting dust bunnies under their bed and like reorganizing the toy bin or quick messaging back a client or, posting something and just, I wasn't really in the room and I missed that time with them, right? And that really focused time with them because I thought I had something else I had to get done. And so that presence, I think, is something we want, but yet we're scattered, we're spread because we have lots of things we want to be present with, right? And so, yeah, I think that becomes a challenge for us. I don't know, Kevin, what is it like for guys? Do you feel some of those same things?
Well, I will say this: there is beautiful gifts that God gave women, and beautiful gifts that God did give to men, and the one overpowering gift that He gave to all females is the ability to multitask, to do 7, 8, 9, 10 things, where I'll find myself when I go from 1 to 2, pretty stable. When I go to 3, that's when the frustration starts coming in. So we're not built to multitask as well as what a woman is. And that's by God's design. So the heaviness of what a woman takes on versus a man, that's why God made man and He made woman. We are built differently. So it's a beautiful gift. Being that I lived with 4 women for quite some time with my bride and my 3 daughters, I got to have a front row seat. It was overly impressive. And so to get to see how they were all doing so many different things at one time, and I'm thinking, holy gosh, I don't know how they do it. So it was beautiful, but I totally understand because I'm a girl dad, that it's a beautiful gift that God did give to women. So,
Yeah.
And just because we can doesn't mean we should.
I was just going to say, I think we're just doing a good job of keeping up appearances, Kevin, because really, I don't think we're truly created to multitask either, because it spreads our focus thin, and then we're not present, to the people and things that really matter. And, there are balls that get dropped when we're trying to be in more than one place at the same time. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That is well said. And I love what Ton just said about just because we can, that doesn't mean we should do it all the time. And that is something that you do. You have to check yourself with your awareness. And then I'm going to use the terminology, pump the brakes a little bit. I'm not going to be able to I'm doing 4 things now. I'm doing them pretty well. I don't need to go to 6, 7, or 8 and do them as you stated. I don't do them as well. I'm going to be spread thin. And so I'm not going to be as productive anyway. So,
yeah, I want to share a question with you that really made a big difference. And like, this has like literally been life shaping for the women that I work with and you guys who are listening to. We often run around asking the question, what time is it? And then we check our watch or our phone or our computer or the thing on the wall. I actually intentionally purchased a watch that does not ring, ding, or ping at me. And it doesn't have any numbers or lines or dots. It just has 2 hands. So it does not give me like an exact number, because really when we ask the question, what time is it? Generally we feel behind, it's like this, like all of a sudden the anxiety, right? Like panic sets in because it's later than you realized, or something took longer than you thought, or you should have already left or been somewhere else, or fill in the blank, right? So we start running to catch up. And so I've taught women to make this very simple shift from what time is it to what is it time for? Just that question alone slows you down. You don't feel like you have to run out the door when you ask that question. It slows you down to 2 things. Number 1, the purpose of, or the presence of your time. You do have time, right? And whenever you don't think you do have time, go check your phone screen time and see how much time you gave away to that thing. The average person gives it 4.5 hours a day, which if you do the math over a year's time is about 100 waking days of the year that you give away to your device, like a third of our life. And we say we don't have time. So we do. But then it slows us down to the presence of our time. Like, what is the purpose in front of me? Right. And there's where like the quality over the quantity, right, comes in, so that if I can be fully focused on a conversation with my husband or with a client or with one of my kids or even just the Lord, right? Like not even the Lord, right? He would be the first one, but then there's going to be so much more value, so much more return on that time than me just watching my, my watch and being, conscious and aware of the actual, minutes and hours that are ticking away.
Yeah.
That is good in regards to, so the watch thing is awesome. And that was kind of right in line with another question that I wanted to ask you and have you help our female listeners. So for the women that are busy, overwhelmed, and they're out there, and they have their to-do list that is, it's 9 pages long most of the time. Besides the watch, that was fantastic. What's another small little shift that they can make, or you would recommend them to make, to start stewarding time instead of managing it so much?
Yeah. Well, I'd love to talk about the difference between managing time and stewarding time, because I think we've all been told, right, you just need to get better at managing your time. And so we think what that means is if I get more organized, right, and I get everything all lined up, then, it's going to feel like I have enough time for all these things. But the definition of manage literally means to keep contained or under control, right? So what happens when you get that, that closet that finally has been driving you crazy, you pull everything out, right? You, whatever, you put it back in,
Yeah.
It just goes from order to disorder, right? And oftentimes it's worse than it was before. And so when we are always trying to manage our time, we're trying to keep it from getting away. We're literally it's like, first of all, it's playing whack-a-mole, right? But it's really this fear-based response to our time, right? I'm focusing on the time not getting away from me. But of course, more things keep getting added on our plate. And literally, because I'm trying to keep everything under control, I'm capping my results. If you see my hands, right? And so as I started to search scripture and look for what, God says about our time, there's so many parables and biblical principles around how we steward our resources. Over half of Jesus' parables were about stewarding resources, and time is one of them. And, in Matthew 25, he talks about that servant who went and buried the one talent in the ground, right? He kept it contained and under control. He managed it, right? He kept it from getting away, but he also capped the results. It didn't produce anything. It just sat there, right? And it didn't do anything. So to steward literally means to invest on behalf of the owner with an expectation of expansion, right? So if you were to if I were to be say for example, you guys were going on a trip and I was, going to come and house sit for you, right? I wouldn't want to just move in, kick up my feet and start acting like I owned the place and everything that was in it, right? I would always have this awareness of this is Kevin and Tanya's house. And so I want to care for it in a way that is going to, protect it. And I'm going to leave it a little bit nicer than when I got there, right? I'm going to have this different approach to it. And so that's what happened with those other two servants in that parable. It didn't matter that one got 2 talents and one got 5 talents. They understood there was a purpose behind why it was given to them. And that was to expand the kingdom, right? And so they went out and invested it. We don't know every detail, and I'm sure they lost some things in investments and whatever, right? But by the time the master came back, first of all, they were living like he was coming back, right? Because they wanted to be able to present to him what they had done with what he'd given them. Kingdom math kicked in, right? They had doubled what they'd been given, right? And so what happens? He says, let me trust you with more, right? And so here's this difference between if I'm just trying to manage time and keep it contained, or am I actually here to use this as a resource to build something bigger than me? And so I think this is this different shift that we have to have around our time is, things are going to get out of line, even when I line it up and make it look all pretty and things like that. And that's okay when I have this bigger purpose behind how I approach my time, that it's something that I'm called to multiply, not just manage. And, so it's a little bit of a nuance, but it does make a difference in how you approach it and what your expectation is, because you're not approaching out of fear that it's not enough and it's going to get away, but out of faith that it's more than enough and that it has possibility in it to produce, multiple times what you could do on your own. And that's where we get the 30, 60, 100-fold that we hear about in scripture as well, right?
Yes. Very good.
Indeed.
So Lissa, on going a little bit deeper in all of these things, one thing that you talk about is Untime Management, and we'll go deeper in that. But how does your Untime Management differ? Because there's a lot of management tools and systems and and yours is unique because it's an Untime Management. How does it differ from the productivity systems that we see everywhere that have time blocking and batching? And how do you use what makes your approach more sustainable and spirit-led, would you say?
Yeah. I love this question because it is really about how we approach it, right? How am I living today and using the 24 hours that God's placed in front of me in light of that day, in light of the fact that this is not all there is, in light of the fact that this is building, towards eternity, right?
Yeah.
And forever, we won't have clocks or calendars or checklists or, planners that we're carrying around, right? So I think it starts with that understanding of, of like, my time is not my own. It is not my biggest obstacle. And I think that's where so many people are trying to they see time as a problem. And so they're trying to fix it. Right. And so, but when we approach it as this is what holds the opportunity to do what God has called us to, it's not the obstacle to it. It's the opportunity, right? It slows us down to not be wasteful with it. I mean, there's so many parallels between time and money, right? We don't want to waste money for sure, just like time. But even there's a difference between spending and investing, right? Where when I'm just spending, yes, it's, transactions are going in and out, but I don't have a whole lot in return for that, right? Versus how am I investing this such that it brings a good return? And so I've kind of coined a term and used this in my coaching called ROTI, ROTI, return on time invested. Like, have you checked your ROTI, right? Because we can just, you can just keep spending money, right? But if you're not paying attention to the ROI, right? Like, how can you make strategic decisions about where that money should be going? The same thing happens with our time.
Are you and your spouse building a business? You're craving a deeper connection. You want to step away from the hustle world. But what if your business wasn't just successful, but actually sacred?
Join us this fall for Couples in the Castle, where luxury meets leadership and legacy, ready to reset, realign, and step into their royal identity.
Apply now at conquerpreneur.com/castle. There are limited spots available.
So part of it is really looking at time as this asset, right? And paying attention to what it's producing, and not just letting it continue to get away from us. And then even when it gets into practical things, is we still need time to the practical things, right? Like, instead of time blocking, I teach time anchoring. And it's a very different perspective, because time blocking, I think, is really a glorified checklist on your Google Calendar. Like, it really is just time stamping your to-do list is essentially what it is. And what happens when one block gets off or something takes longer than you expected? It's like, the pile up on, on whatever the nearest highway is around the nearest city by you. And then, you're frustrated and exhausted and why bother and all of that. And so I teach this concept called time anchoring, where it asks the question, what is it time for? And I believe we have 5 main time anchors in our day. 2 of them are refills to refill body, mind, and spirit. And that's how we start and end our day. And then we have our times to pour out. 2 of those are into family, friends, household, and then, then the work that we do. And so when we are approaching those, not as these strict time blocks that are so tightly packed, right, that I feel really stressed trying to keep up with it all, but as these spacious time blocks, just like an anchor, right? When a boat is anchored, it's got a rope that attaches it to the anchor, but it's not taut. It's not so tight that there's no room to move, because what would happen when the wind and the waves came, that boat would smash, right. It would be broken to pieces. And so I think we have to approach our time in these more spacious blocks and knowing what it's time for, right? And then I'm not trying to throw everything in the same pot and wonder why it feels like a mess, or constantly feel like I'm just jumping from one thing to the next. It allows some space to be able to do that, but it keeps bringing us back to the answer to that question: what is it time for? And that's really key. And you brought up productivity. I believe stewardship should motivate productivity and profitability. Like, if I truly believe that what I have been entrusted belongs to someone else, I will want to use it well and wisely, right? I will want to be able to say, here's the return, right? From what I've done with what you've given me. So I think, it should, we shouldn't just be sitting on the couch being like, okay, God's got it. And there is a level of responsibility, right? Yeah. But it comes from this, because we have a relationship with him. And that was the problem with that one servant. He thought the master was a harsh man and would be upset.
That's right.
Right? He didn't really know him. He didn't really have a relationship with him. Otherwise, he would have known who he was and why he gave him what he did. And so I think those things then, yes, I have a planner that I've created that helps order your heart and your calendar, and so there are tangible tools we need to help us make time, more tangible and be able to put it in order. But it's always coming from that stewardship perspective. And that's good. That's the biggest difference.
That's good, Lissa. I think and I've mentioned this to you before. I call certain things that when you really have that relationship with him there's certain times that I will do things when I know that I'm in his pocket. Like when I know that, I'm not in the stress mode of like, I got to get it done. In that time, I call it kingdom standard time, where it literally just melts away. It melts away stress. It melts away the strife. It just is like, gosh, just sit in your kingdom standard time, and he multiplies the time. He makes it go so quickly. What may take 4 hours, takes 2. It's just beautiful. And I think when you have such a great perspective, and it's really about our heart, as you talk about, it's really what is our heart and what is relationship, not religion. There's such a difference, and you do such a great job of, just like you explained that. That's really good. And I'm reading this book. I'm almost done with it. It's actually called, oh gosh, here I go. I think it's called Eternity Invading Time. That's what it is. And we'll talk more about your book coming up, but I know Kevin wanted to ask a question.
Well, you'd mentioned it. You put a little snapshot, but let's go a little bit more deeper with regards to am I saying it right? ROTI, ROTI?
ROTI.
ROTI. So return on investment. That is awesome. I know we heard the term all the time, ROI, but return on investment. Can you unpack and go a little deeper for our listeners in regards to how that's beneficial?
Yes. We're very familiar with ROI, right? And nobody would like give money over to an investment, person and not expect them to pay attention to what it's producing, right? And if it's not producing, you're going to like look at it and say, okay, do I just need to give this more time? Or is this really not the place for me to be putting my money, and we're going to then make some adjustments with that. And so I think the same thing is true with our time. And so I actually differentiate between what I call a busyness owner and a CEO. So a busyness owner is busy doing business things, right? It feels productive, but they're not necessarily producing results. How often does our to-do list feel like we're doing all the things we should be doing? But when we actually look at the numbers, what is this producing in, like in the impact it's making, in the income it's bringing in, and, the connections and the invitations, whatever, like busyness is not the same as fruitfulness. And so here is where we have to pay attention to the ROTI, because we can otherwise just keep spending time doing things that feel business-like, but it's really just busyness. And then, so I've redefined CEO as a Christ-empowered operator of a God-given business, right? Where we are seeing our time as this abundant gift, seeing it as the most valuable business asset that we have, because we know that where we invest it is what's going to bring the return, right? And here's where then, that time with him each day, I call, he's our chairman of the board. Nothing happens outside of him, right? Like we can have all the great ideas, but the buck stops there. We're seeking his direction, his discernment around what's an interruption and what's an invitation. Where is time just being wasted or even spent, and where is it being invested and bringing back a return? And so we have to pay attention to, how much time am I spending on this thing? And then what kind of return is this bringing? And then make some, prayerful, strategic decisions around whether or not we want to continue doing that. So I think this really helps actually simplify our to-do list a lot, because I think we see all these shiny objects, squirrel, hello, we have these feeds that are filling us in inboxes and, and all these things of all the things we could do or we should do. And so we just add it to the list, because if they're doing it and they look amazing, then we probably should too. And, but it's not necessarily producing results or what we're called, the kind of fruit that we're called to produce. And I love that, Jesus talks about remain in me. That's how you produce fruit, right? Like apart from me, you can do nothing that's going to add up to anything or last. And it's to his glory that we bear much fruit. People should be able to look at us and see the fruit of our time and be like, what is she doing? What is he doing? Right? What's he doing different? Like we're doing it with God, right? That should make our results different than the world's.
Totally. And how are you doing it? Instead of how, ask who. It's the who. That's how, it's scrambling the WHO and the HOW. It's like, it's the who, not the how. When you have the who, he shows you how in all the ways.
Which is why I believe the enemy's number one tactic is to attack our time and attention.
Yeah.
Right? Like Jesus said, John 10:10, I came to give you life to the full. That does not mean a life that's too full, but the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And I think our number one commodity these days is our time and attention. Because if we are busy and distracted, we are of no threat to the enemy and we're of no use to the kingdom. We're over here just chasing our own tail or,
that's
whatever. And he's like, all right, don't have to worry about them. Let's go find the people who are actually doing some kingdom work. Right?
Exactly. Oh, that's, we talk about that. We talk about, well, they're not messing with them over there because he's already got them in his grip.
You're not a threat.
Yeah, you're not a threat. That's really, really good. And I think that so many people, hear these sort of things like, yeah, but ...
Mm-hmm.
How do I do this? So let's talk about your private podcast that you have, Lissa. What's one mindset shift that you teach in it that maybe could help a woman listening today or a man? Listen, let's be real.
It applies to all of us.
That could get back, 5 hours this week. What is one mindset shift that we always like to give a practical tip to our listeners? We heard your Conquer story, which was about you were in the hustle and grind basically, and too stressed, too overwhelmed. Your time was managing you instead of you untiming it, the unmanagement of it. So give us some practical tips for our listeners.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because I think we think, like the time blocks are what's going to save us and organize us. And yet we tend to waste up to 3 hours a day just chasing those time blocks, planning them, replanning them when things get off, trying to get back or giving up and saying, I'm just gonna start tomorrow. And so, we've got these to-do lists. I mean, talk about open tabs. When you talked about that earlier, here's what I envisioned. Like right now, how many tabs are open on your computer screen? I'm not asking you guys to say this out loud, but like just saying in general, like listeners,
right.
Like think about like, even if you're not looking at everything behind all those tabs, first of all, sometimes I see so many tabs. I'm like, how do you even stand it? How do you find what you need? That right there is wasting time, but it's always distracting you to what you need to come back to. Right. And we just think like, this is going to save me time, and so we have all these little, tips and tricks and tools that we think are going to save us time. And then it actually, again, it's focusing on like keeping hold of time versus like, wow, what can happen if I like trust this in the hands of the one who actually gave me time? And so really, that shift comes in, that perspective on our time, that we have to shift our belief from I don't have enough time. Because how many of us have said, I don't have time. If I had time, if only I had time, when I have time, we think after this, after this project or after this season or after the kids move out or after the house gets sold or after whatever, we'll have more time. We don't. So we have to shift that perspective, right, to more than enough time. And now as a steward, I start asking the question, what is it time for? Right. Mm-hmm. And so now I start approaching my time in a different way, not as something that's getting in the way, but something that is making a way. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I teach in there is the laws of the harvest from Galatians 6. That, we have to start thinking like a wise farmer, right? Like they have to plant their seeds, right? Which is our time in the fields that we've been entrusted, the lives and businesses and ministries, right? In the right season and have faith that the growth will come, right? And so not only do we reap what we sow, we also don't reap and sow in the same season. There's time in between, right? And there's this active role in our waiting and what are we doing in that waiting time? How are we trusting God in that? There's another law of the harvest that says we reap more than we sow. No farmer would become a farmer if one kernel of corn produced one kernel of corn. That would be a waste of time, right? But God multiplies, right? And then, of course, we reap if we don't give up, right? God brings the harvest in his time. And so here's where, we really seek the Lord of the harvest around, okay, what seeds have you given me? What fields have you assigned me to? What is the season right now? What is it time for? And how am I faithfully putting the seed in the ground? Because to sow literally means to start the growth process.
Right.
And unless we put that seed in the ground, it can sit in the barn all day long and do nothing, right?
So, seed time and harvest.
Exactly. Yeah. I love to have like lots of like tangible examples because time is that thing you can't put your fingers on, right? So I like to have lots of ways that we can kind of make it practical and think about what we do with that time, and how we're approaching it and how we're using it and what's coming out of it.
I love that. Honestly, just the one verbiage shift of saying, what time is it? What time is it? It's to say, what's it time for? Throwing that preposition at the end,
So good.
So it changes I think it changes, I've done a lot of the whole subconscious study and all of that. So it changes your subconscious It reminds me of the word trying. When you use the word try, anytime that word scientifically tells your subconscious that you're not going to do it, I'm going to try that. Let's try this. So the word try, even in as a hypnotist, whether you believe in it or not, when a hypnotist says the word try, if they said, Lissa, lift your arm, and you lift your arm, you're under hypnosis. The minute she or he says, Lissa, try to lift your arm, it can't go up because the subconscious is telling it already, power of our words, to not. So just the power of your shifting, of asking that question instead of what time is it, because that has such an attachment of a subconscious thought. I would imagine if you had science, studies in that just that shifting of that question changes it. I feel it when you said it. I was like, that's so good.
Yes.
And there
So
are certain times we have to know the exact time, right? The time that we got on to record this, or the time that we have to, church
Absolutely.
starts, or those types of things. But
right.
yeah, why we shouldn't be running, chasing a clock or a calendar
Exactly.
or a checklist telling us exactly where to be and what to do
Yes.
all day long.
Yes.
I love it. And it's not just for women. I'm going to go ahead and say that.
Yeah.
I love that because I do find myself on a daily basis looking at the clock, what time, so you're right. I have specific appointments, but it's so nice. That's refreshing to say it's now time to do X. So that's good. Good.
Yep.
Let's pivot a little bit, Lissa. Let's talk a little bit about your faith and how faith has shaped the way you like to teach time stewardship, and how can women invite God into their time decision without feeling like she's being less productive. What's some good advice and ideas you can share with our listeners regarding that?
Well, it's so interesting. There is a book by Randy Alcorn called The Treasure Principle. And in that book, he says that when a steward starts acting like an owner, they become an embezzler. And it's just, this perspective we have in our time. I just read the book Kingdom Stewardship by Tony Evans with some of my clients a couple months ago. And just, we should be approaching everything in our life like, this does not belong to me. Right. And so our business, our relationships, our health, our money, our time, like our giftings, like all of these things are from him. Like, these are the seeds that he has entrusted to us. And that should change how we do things. We should be living today in light of the fact that this is not all there is. It's not about building my comfort zone. It's about building his kingdom, and that, I'm building towards eternity with him. And I think that should affect every single thing that we do in our life. And time is that thing that underlies everything, right? What time I'm investing in a relationship with him, what time I'm investing in my wellness, what time I'm investing in my marriage or my parenting or, my health or whatever, my business, ministry, so it really is, it gives that deeper purpose behind it. And it's interesting because although, yes, if you're looking at it from like a religion perspective, it may feel like, oh, here are all these now. I feel like I have this responsibility that's very heavy. It actually is very freeing. And I have so many conversations with women around this of just like, when it felt like it all depended on me, I was exhausted and running all the time. And now that I know it doesn't, and that I am partnering with, the God who's beyond time, like, here's where it, just even it helps us to focus on not just the seen, which is temporary, but on the unseen, that's eternal, right? And even the purpose behind some of the seen things that are in front of us. And so I think it just really shapes, how and why we do what we do really in every area of our life. And that's what we should be doing as believers.
Yes. Especially, and he stands outside of time. So we feel constricted to this, but he's standing out of it saying, I got you, girl. I've created this time for us to steward, as you said. That's really good, Lissa. So before we wrap up and come to the end of our podcast, what would you say to the woman who still believes maybe she's not enough? There's never enough time. How am I going to do this? And like you, so great when you said at the beginning, your kids are doing this and you're over there cleaning up and organizing. And it's so interesting. Again, with birthdays we become a lot wiser than than in the beginning, because you think I look back and think, why didn't I take naps when my kids did? Like, what was I doing cleaning up? Why didn't I nap? But in the same breath, we don't want, there's no any conviction comes from Christ, condemnation comes from the enemy. So these are just a convicting. I'm sure many listeners are convicted in this message. And so there's no condemnation in this. For the woman who doesn't feel like she's enough or has enough time, what would you say to her?
First of all, you have time. I think that's that reminder that needs, like, I end every podcast episode on the Redeem Her Time podcast with that. And I have women tell me, like, Lissa, you're in my head. When I start feeling like, I don't have time, they just hear that, like, you have time. I put a period after each word. It's all in caps. I want you to slow down to, like, you have time. And then the other thing that I would say is order determines capacity. I don't know if you can, it's probably out of view here, but I do have this little visual that I do. I call it my oranges and Skittles. It's like the river rocks and the pebbles, right? And so interesting. Yeah. I do this illustration where I put the Skittles in first and it fills up like 2/3 of the jar. Skittles don't have a whole lot of value they're adding to our life, let's be honest, right? Then there's not room for the oranges, which are the juicy things, the things that matter. And the oranges are not fitting and they're overflowing. We take everything out, we put the oranges in first, and then the exact same amount of Skittles fit in with nothing coming over the top. You can see, right? Like there's nothing coming over the top here, right? And so it really is like, I do have time, right? This glass jar is our time. And I do have a choice as to what I allow to fill it, and how can I put the oranges in first, knowing there will be Skittles in life and that's okay. Right. Yeah. But like, yeah. And then, that's how there's time for it all. We really identify, what really matters and intentionally put those things into our time first.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Let's go.
And that little, whatever you want to call that thing looks amazing right now. Skittles and oranges.
My Skittles are a little dusty, so because it sits here behind here.
An example, Dave.
I'll have to stop my husband. Don't eat any of my Skittles because I need it to go to the top.
I love it. Well, Lissa, this has been so freeing and empowering. Tell our listeners where they can connect with you, learn more about your Untime framework, or subscribe to your private podcast. Where can they learn more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, well, the best place to go is redeemhertime.com. You can grab access to the Productive and Profitable CEO private podcast right there. You can also link up to my public podcast called Redeem Her Time, and learn more about the Redeem Her Time Planner, right? Where I actually have a tangible way for you to really be thinking about your time, interacting with where your time is going. And there's a free digital course that goes with it to help rightly order your heart according to what scripture teaches, as well as our calendar. So yeah, redeemhertime.com is where you can find all of those, and especially that private podcast if you're a business owner.
Oh,
fantastic.
And we will have all of that in the show notes on this episode. And if today's episode brought you clarity, or as we said earlier, conviction, or of a mom or a CEO who is just in the rat race, honestly, trying to get a piece of cheese and it's just keeps chasing her tail or his tail. Share this with somebody who's building their business, CEO, coach, consultant, mom, who needs this, who needs to get off of the hamster wheel and exhale and know that we always say there is a higher, not harder way to do it. And Lissa has incredible insight. You've only shared just a few nuggets of what she can impart in you and impress upon you to have really freedom, I would say, because time can literally put us in a prison in our own lives, as she noted in the beginning with her health. So don't forget to subscribe so you never miss your next breakthrough and the content can be shared with others.
And if you are a married entrepreneur couple ready to divine reset, ready for a divine reset, let's do it that way. You are invited to join us this fall in Scotland for Couples in the Castle. Our exclusive 5-star, more than a mastermind, is a royal identity experience to help you align, recalibrate, and rise into your next season together.
And like we like to end all of our podcasts,
Peace in.
peace out.
Kevin.
And Tanya Stout. So how many of you are ready to conquer your business, your income, and your life? Hit subscribe and join the Conquer Club, and let's start winning together.
Peace in.
Peace out.
Kevin and Tanya Stout.